Welcome to the Conscious Combat Club, trauma-informed martial arts by women, for women. I'm your host Georgia, and I cannot wait to go on this journey with you. Please note that some listeners might find this content distressing. Take care, connect with your support networks, and refer to the organisations in the show notes below. In today's conversation, I'm joined by the wonderful Assunta Morrone. In my opinion, the perfect blend of human, which is the intersection of a feminist and a martial artist. So Assunta is a first-generation migrant woman from Italy. She moved when she was 3 years old. Her pronouns are she, her. She has olive skin and curly black hair. So Assunta has spent her professional career working in the health and community sector with a focus on social justice and intersectional feminism, a queen. She is a fifth dan in the Japanese martial art of Aikido and has a long history of teaching self-defense. So in this conversation, we get into discussions around bringing feminism into martial arts, the ways that gender influences our experiences of training, some of the similarities and differences between self-defense and martial arts, and what the role is of martial arts in working with victim survivors, particularly thinking about the types of violence that women are most likely to experience, which is violence in the home. So this conversation, we already have a content warning at the start of our episodes, but I just want to say a very strong content warning on domestic and family violence in this conversation. If that's not for you, we have many other podcasts that you can go back to. If that's okay for you, strap in, because I think this is a really, really deep, heartfelt, and beautiful conversation that I know you're going to love. Assunta, welcome to our show. I'm so excited for the breadth of topics and genres that I think this conversation is going to take us down. And I want to start with not a small concept, but one that I think comes up a lot for us at the Conscious Combat Club is people coming into a kickboxing space and imagining that it's going to be self-defense and this kind of tug of war that there is between self-defense and martial arts. Can you speak to what you think about the connection between martial arts and self-defense?
Yes, it's a really interesting connection because, yeah, you're right. Like when people find out I do martial arts, they're like, oh, so you could kick my ass and protect yourself. And I'm like, I could, but I probably wouldn't use my martial arts because, martial arts is a sport. It's complicated. It has many sort of elements. And I see martial arts as like a choreographed dance because your partner is allowing you and giving you the gift of practicing your art, right? So when so I do Aikido, which is a Japanese martial art. So when we are doing technique, your partner's allowing you to explore the technique. In a self-defense situation, if you try and do some complicated technique, you could get hurt. And so often people think, I'll be able to protect myself, but it's not always the case. The other thing is that often society has the wrong view about women protecting themselves. So I started martial arts when I started Taekwondo when I was a child, and my dad made me go to Taekwondo. Well, actually, made all of us go to Taekwondo, me, my brother, and my sister. And he said we needed to protect ourselves. So we went off to Taekwondo, and I did this Taekwondo class. And then my brother got sick of it, and he quit. But my dad wouldn't let me quit because he said to me, "You're a girl, and you need to know how to protect yourself." And I found this then as I, understood this concept later of women needing to protect themselves, because it's ingrained from us as a child through sexism, patriarchy, colonization, racism, discrimination, all of that we take on as women. And we live in a society where we are all taught that we need to protect ourselves because of the systems around us. And that burden is often placed on women. And so when you grow up with that, you think, yes, I need to use martial arts to protect myself. But unless you look at it from a feminist perspective, because so the other thing that feminism and the other thing that patriarchy teaches us is that we have to be nurturing and caring and not hurt people. And so I couldn't wrap my head around, well, I need to protect myself, but then I have to, kick someone and hurt them, right? And there was this constant conflict for me around that. And I think that's the constant conflict that often women face. And I don't know if you see that in your class, but when I used to teach self-defense, and women go, "Oh no, I can't gouge someone's eyes out," you know. And yes, because we're taught to be nice. And so that's the constant conflict that we have in this situation. Does that sort of make sense?
It does. And it's really interesting, right? So what do you think the real value is in learning self-defense then? Like, is it in the techniques themselves? Is it in the capacity to protect oneself? Or is it in, I mean, it doesn't have to be one or the other. And this is a leading question, I realize, as I'm asking it, because I know how I feel about this. But
Yeah.
I mean, is it more this embodied experience that contradicts patriarchy, where we're saying, actually, I can have power within, power to other people. I can, um, you know, do things that we're not taught is for women to do, or that women should do, that goes against our nurturing nature. Like, what do you think is the important part of self defense, or is there not
Yeah.
one?
Well, there is. And I think the most important part is trusting your instincts, right?
Mm,
So often as women, we're taught that, we doubt ourselves, right? So I'm on a train, I'm sitting in my seat, there's seats all around me, right? And all of a sudden, this guy gets on, and I clock him, and you make eye contact, and your gut tells you there's something going on. Next thing you know, he's sitting right next to you when there's all these other seats, right?
mm,
And and now, for me, as a 60-year-old woman who feels empowered and don't care what anybody thinks, I would just get up and change seats. Because I don't care what this guy thinks about me, because he's nothing to me, right? But what we find is that women go, I don't want to be rude. He's going
mm,
to think that I think he's a terrible guy. Well, who cares, right? So so in a self-defense course, what we need to take a feminist approach, and we need to take a feminist lens, because if we don't take a feminist lens, right, we don't address those issues that we as women face every day, and that this conditioning that patriarchy teaches us, that we have to be nice and we have to care about other people, right? So if I'm walking down the street and someone's behind me and I feel like, this guy might be following me, just step aside and let him get in front of you.
mm,
And he might turn around and go, "Oh, you're a stupid bee," right? Well, then you were right, weren't you? Right? If he does that, you
mhm,
go, "Yeah, I was right." But if he had no intention, he'd just keep walking, right? So it's really about, the first thing is about trusting your instincts, listening to your body, listening to that feeling when you know something's wrong, and acting on that. And then, like, that's the most important. Now, I'm not suggesting that there aren't times when you need to physically fight
mm,
back or physically hurt someone, but only to get away, right? So you don't want to go 10 rounds with somebody, right? You want to get away really quickly. But it's knowing when to do that. So it's probably inappropriate if some guy sits next to you on the train and you just elbow him in the throat, right?
yep.
Not an okay reaction, right? But to get up and walk away is a perfect okay reaction. The other thing is not being too hard on ourselves. Like, sometimes we get it wrong. And the problem with self defense is that when people teach it, and mostly men, I'm going to call it, mostly men teach self defense to women. There are women who do, but it's one of those things that they go, "Oh, we'll get a man to teach because they know to protect themselves." Well, actually, they don't, because um, most of the, community violence is perpetrated by men against other men. But anyway, so I guess it's really about you know not being on alert all the time. You can't live your life on alert. Like,
Mm,
sometimes you're distracted, or I don't know, you get it wrong, right? So don't be too hard on yourself. And if you do get it wrong, so if I was sitting next to this guy and his hand started to go onto my knee, you can just turn around and say, "Stop touching my knee. Get your hand off my knee."
Mm.
That's another self-defense technique. So your voice and your words are another self-defense technique. And, and then sure, maybe he might not respond, or maybe you can't get away and you might have to like hurt him to get away. But, you know, there's a range of techniques that you can use before you get to physical, and there's also a range of techniques that you need to learn before we start to teach these sort of techniques. Because if you don't believe that you're worth fighting for, or that you have the right to, you're not going to hurt someone when you need it. Can I tell you a story about?
Please.
So I had a woman, so I used to teach self-defense many years ago, and I had a woman in the class, and it was an 8-week course, and she came back. And when they come back, we'd say, "Oh, did you practice any of the techniques that we taught you?" Right? And this was about maybe week 5. So we'd started to do physical techniques like punches to the nose, throat, those sort of things. She goes, I use self-defense, and I'm like, oh God, oh no, what did she do? What did she do? She goes, so she starts telling me this. She goes, I went into a jeans. I was going to buy a new pair of jeans, and I'm like, yeah. And she goes, and so I went into the store and I wanted to buy this pair of jeans, and there was 2 pairs. You know how you get special 2 pairs for like $50 or something,
Mm-hmm.
and but 1 pair was like $30. And she goes, and the woman tried to convince me to buy 2 pairs for $50. And she goes, normally I would have just said, oh, okay, I'll get the 2 pairs, even though I couldn't afford it. Anyway, and so this woman kept pressuring her, going, oh, you should get 2 pairs. She goes, no, I just want 1 pair. Thank you very much. And I'm like, that's amazing, and it's those little things that, teach us to speak up.
Mm.
That are all part of how we protect ourselves in the world. Anyway, I thought it was a funny, interesting, interpretation of a self-defense course.
Yeah. Boundary setting as a skill, right? And I think it's interesting that that was a few weeks into the course, because there's this, like, in my view, almost disconnect between conversations that we'll have and presentations that we'll give, where we'll say, it's really important to stand up for yourself, or, don't be worried about, in inverted commas, looking like a bitch, look
Mm,
after yourself. But that
mm,
is the difference between saying that to somebody and someone intellectually, or like having an understanding of that and
mm,
saying, okay, I get it, and
mm,
actually being that woman and setting a
mm,
boundary in the jeans store. There's quite a
mm.
big gap between that. And I think
Yes,
that's one of the real values of martial arts and self-defense training. Both do this particularly when they're facilitated intentionally, is
yes,
to get repetition at saying no, or thinking, what do I want to do? How do I want to respond? And taking back our agency from
yes.
a real experiential place rather than an intellectual place.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure you do this. We used to do a lot of role plays, and and you've got to learn to use your voice, because we're taught to be so quiet, and people don't like, and I have curly black hair. People don't like women who are loud, who have curly hair, who look different, have funny names, right? And so there's all these things that we try and make ourselves smaller and fit in. Like I keep making my hair bigger and bigger. The bigger the hair, the better, right? Because I want to take up space. Because men take
Mm,
up space. This world is dominated by men who take up space, and so that physicality is really important as well. How women present themselves, in that physical space as well. By taking up space, going into places, using your voice, setting those boundaries. The other thing also that I want to address is that that often when men teach self-defense courses, they teach it in the context of community violence. And what
mm,
we know is that most women are not attacked in the community; they're attacked in their own homes, and
yeah.
violence occurs in their own home. And so I think that again, we need to take a feminist lens from this, and not this is not about making women responsible for their safety, because I think that we should make perpetrators accountable for their violence. But it's not about making them responsible. It's about giving women power back.
Mm,
And I think that we do teach self-defense classes, we've got to be really careful that if a woman is experiencing family and domestic violence, that it can be really dangerous for her to fight back sometimes. And so often victims of family and domestic violence, fight back in inverted commas in other ways. So there's other acts of resistance that they do to keep them and their kids safe. And yeah, I think that's something that we've really, got to be really careful of and be aware of, that it's not the same as a stranger in the street. And there's all sorts of sort of dependency that you have when you're living with someone who's controlling you financially, economically, psychologically, all those sorts of things. So yeah.
What are some of the messages you would give to women in current violent situations? So I'll give you an example of a conversation that I've had in a class previously. So when we were in El Salvador facilitating there, um, we were working with a community of women who were experiencing multiple forms of violence: police violence, domestic and family violence, gang-based violence. And domestic and family violence was certainly their biggest concern. And so you've got women who live in community where there's not an authority service that can be trusted. So calling the police isn't an option. There are a lot of weapons. And so the conversations that we ended up having, and I think at this point, this was a couple of years ago now, I don't know whether I would handle it better now, but at the time we started talking, things shifted from less kickboxing and more towards self-defense, because we wanted to give the women agency over what do you want to be taught? What do you want to learn from the time that we have together? And the scenario started to get more and more specific, until we're talking about, how do we respond if somebody is holding a gun against me against the wall, and like, what would I do? And there's not a self-defense technique for that, right? There just isn't. And so our conversation became, this class is so valuable for you to move your body, do something that's a time that is just for you, and really, really importantly, to be in community. I want you to do whatever you need to do to keep yourself safe. That's not going to be self-defense based. And then look around at all of these women here that you've now formed a network with. They are the people you can go and seek refuge with in order to preserve your safety, because it's not going to be a kick or a punch that's going to be able to do that. What other, I suppose, things would you want to raise, or in those kind of contexts, having those kinds of conversations? Because it's just, I don't know, I think it's really shitty to have to be the person who says, I don't have a technique that's going to save you. There isn't one.
Yeah, I think you handled it perfectly, because it's exactly what I would have said, right? So when you have a situation where you are, like the perpetrator is, holding a gun to your head, or is threatened to hurt your children, whatever, you do whatever you need to do to keep yourself safe. And we know that women in domestic violence situations are the experts in their own safety. We know that they keep themselves safe. They've been doing this, and I am an FDV worker, right? And as an FDV worker, I never came to a situation and told a woman what to do, because she had kept her and her children safe before I came along, right? And thought I had all the answers. And we never pretend to know the answers, because we're not in that woman's situation. And she's the expert in how to keep herself safe. She's been probably doing it for years. And, it's really about doing whatever you need to do to get out of that situation, appeasing the perpetrator. We know that women use survival sex, right? We know that women use acts of resistance by, we've had women tell us that I just made him angry before the kids came home, so then he'd hit me and he'd leave the kids alone, right? I had sex with him so he wouldn't break me later on, right? So they use a lot of strategies to keep themselves safe. And also, you're right, it's a community response. It needs to be a community response. So, there are, of course, in Australia, there are special services, but in other countries there may not be. So it's about, how do we bring women together to talk about women's business, and to empower them to support each other. That if you can say, hey, can I send the kid to your place because he's really in the shits today and something's going to happen. you know, is it all right if I let you, you know, if I put a sign out and if I put, you know, I don't know, a red tea towel on the clothesline, that means call the police, right? So you have all these strategies with, you know, to protect yourself and to get help. And, you know, and of course we do need laws and we need things that hold perpetrators accountable for their violence. And but that's not always possible in every situation. But yeah, sometimes we don't have the answers, and it's okay to say we don't have the answers. This is a really complex problem that's been going on for a long time. And you know, we all need to like find these spaces where we can work together to support women and support each other, and in a safe way. But yeah, it's hard, and yeah, we don't have the answers, and we don't want to pretend we have the answers because, as I said, she is the expert, and
Yeah.
you know, you have the answers. So even when we do safety planning with women, first question we ask is, what are you already doing to keep you and your kids safe?
Mm.
And they will have a range of strategies, and it's just about, you know, supporting her with that, or yeah, putting in some more strategies. Does that make sense?
It definitely does, yeah. And thank you for that tangent that is less martial arts related, but to us, there's so much overlap, right? And the listeners of this podcast already know this, but you're either intentionally working with victim survivors as a martial arts coach,
Yeah.
or you are unintentionally, right? Because victim survivors will always seek out ways to reclaim their power, whether that
Right.
is through a trauma informed program or not. So these conversations are just so important.
Yeah, and I guess like, you know, because we haven't talked about the benefit of martial art as a physical activity, right? So
Mm.
there's in physical activity because it makes you feel strong. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you feel strong, you feel confident, right? So you know, there's all those things that do help to build your self-esteem and your confidence, and slowly you can start to gain power back and control really slowly, and remove yourself from that dangerous situation. And yeah, and I like what you said. There is no, if anyone tells you there's a technique to get away from a gun, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, sure, I mean, yeah, if someone's got a gun to my head, and my first question is, what do you want?
Mm.
What do you want? And you've got to make those decisions. Now I know that if someone said to me, for me, and this is just me, no one else, right? You make your decisions. But if someone had a gun to my head and said, get in the car, there's no way I'd get in that car, right? Because I know if I go to a second location, I'm going to die. So I'd
Mm.
rather die in the street than die in the car. That's my decision. So you've got to make those decisions for yourself. Someone else might go, okay, I'll get in the car because that's how I'm going to keep myself safe. So you make decisions based on whatever you think is the right decision at the time. If someone had a knife to my throat and I said, what do you want? And they said, I want your laptop, your computer, and your phone, no problem. There you
Yeah.
go. Have it, right? Like, so there's all these decisions that we make, and for me, teaching self-defense is like teaching first aid, right?
Mm.
You We learn first aid because we want to know what to do in an emergency. It's the same thing. We learn self-defense techniques, right? These sort of things. We have these discussions. And what important for me is you get women together and you talk about these things. So with my friends, right? We talk about this and I go, okay, well, all right, what would you do if you did this? And what would you do if this happened? What would you do if this happened? That's a way of practicing what would happen, because in a situation where, you know, you've got the adrenaline, cortisol, all that happening, right? You don't want to go, oh, this is the first time I thought about it,
Yep.
right? It's like first aid. You go, oh yeah, I know what to do, A, B, C, D, right? Um, but yeah, the first thing I do when I feel unsafe, or somebody is like, you know, I'm like, okay, what do you want? Let's just assess the situation, right? And okay, then I make a decision. You want my laptop? There you go. See ya. Right. So it's, yeah. But getting women together, it doesn't always have to be about punching and kicking. Just getting women together and talking about situations that they've been in and how they've dealt with it, and what you could do, what you could have done differently, is a great way. That's protecting yourself.
I'm curious how Aikido fits into this, and I suppose in thinking about
Yeah.
non-violence or acceptance of a situation as a response. That feels to me, as a non-Aikido practitioner,
Mm.
um, at maybe being part of it. And I think as somebody who has interviewed quite a few people who do Aikido, and I train also with an Aikido something Dan black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I will say the translation of his Aikido into Jiu-Jitsu is quite phenomenal. And I'm starting to wonder, is it just like after a long period of time, do you become magic from learning Aikido? Or what is
Oh.
going on there? It might just be him specifically in the way that he's applying the
Mm.
many years of martial arts and throwing people. But it's fascinating, this concept of an art that you practice and always against a non-resisting opponent. Can you talk more to it?
Oh, okay. How long have you got? Um, so yeah, so there's this notion of Aikido, like, so when, if you don't practice Aikido, when you see it,
Mm,
like, if you watch YouTube videos of Aikido, people go, oh, that's bullshit. Like,
mm,
who throws like that? Who's going to throw someone? But but what you learn in Aikido is you learn to adapt, right? So if I've got someone punching me, like, so say someone throwing a forward punch at my head, right? I know that I'm never going to be able to block that punch because there's always going to be someone stronger than me, right? So this is why I gave up Taekwondo. So I'm like, this is bullshit because there's always going to be someone stronger than me, right? So in Aikido, what we do with that punch is that we move out of the way. So it's
mm,
called Taekwondo, right? So you deflect. So you move out of the way of the punch. And then by moving out of the way of the punch, it gives you an opportunity to reflect and do something else, right? Now that person, the attacker, what we call, nage in the attacker, is so committed to that punch that or that attack. Because when you attack, you make yourself vulnerable, right?
mm,
Because you are so focused on attacking that you can't see what's coming next, right? And so by they're so committed to that attack, they're fully committed to that attack. You've moved out of the way and changed their perspective. All of a sudden, there's no attacker there, and they're like, "Oh, where's that attacker gone?" Right? So,
mm,
you change their perspective. If someone's grabbing you, you change their perspective by moving and facing the same direction as them, and then going, "Oh, so this is what you see," right? Um, and falling in Aikido or rolling or taking a kemi in Aikido is a way to protect yourself.
mm,
So we roll because if someone is throwing you, you want to get away from that person, right? But in Aikido, because we practice, we're suckers for punishment. We get up and come back, right? But actually, you're actually moving away. So Aikido is about how do you diffuse that attack, right? Now, some people call it magic. It's not really magic. There's physics in it. But yes, like when Sensei developed the art, it was after the war, and he wanted a non-violent practicing art. And so it is about energy, it's about flow. And when Uke and Nage are practicing together, it's about you've got to match that energy and try and redirect it. And in everyday life, for instance, I decide, do I want to, and there are times in Aikido where you go straight through an attack and you just, like go bang. And I
mm,
decide, do I want to take the Irimi route, which is straight through and barrel my way through this attack? Or do I want to just let this person fall on their own sword, right? Just step away and let them fall on their own sword. So it does, that does translate to life because there are situations also in self defense where you just go, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to step away, right? My self defense technique is to just walk away, or my self defense technique is to just go straight through and deal with it. So, yeah, there are, it does translate into it does translate into life. But as I said, you can use Aikido in a really powerful way that does hurt somebody, we just choose not to, right?
Mm.
And that's a choice you make, right? And as you know, probably, we get people in our dojo coming first time and they're like, oh, do you punch and do you kick people? And you just know they're not going to stay because that's not how we practice. But, now as a fifth dan, sure, if I had to, I would. I could turn an Aikido technique, which is non-violent, into a violent technique.
Mhm.
Is that what I want to do in the practice of my martial art? No, because I don't go there to do that. I go there to learn how to move in the world, how to deal with conflict, how to how to address energy in my body. And rolling is fun. Flying through the air is fun, right? So the first time I saw Aikido was at a demonstration, and there was all these people flying everywhere. And I'm like, oh, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, that's why I do it because it's so much fun. Like that feeling of just having someone throw you and flying through the air and coming back. It's just great. I don't know if that answers your question, but anyway.
It does. And it really brings up for me thoughts around um that's an interesting thought around choice. So this is something that we're constantly thinking about in the work that I do with the Conscious Combat Club is how can we restore choice? How can we create situations where participants can make a choice and that choice um, gets respected? And oftentimes, if you're for example, we do all cooperative exercises. So
Yeah,
pad work where you're working with someone. And Aikido is the same, it's a cooperative exercise. And so it means that when I'm choosing to do something, I'm able to do the thing that I'm choosing to do. Whereas in martial arts, I think jujitsu, for example, oftentimes what I want to do, my opponent does not allow me to do. And, that's part of the fun of it is to pivot. I'm not saying one is good or bad, but
yeah,
when I think about martial arts as a form of trauma healing or as part of somebody's
yeah,
trauma healing journey. That's an
yeah,
interesting sort of
yeah,
take on choice that I haven't thought about is maybe that
yeah.
application as well.
Yeah, because this is the thing. Like, so that's the difference, I guess. Because in Aikido, you're uke. So especially if I'm working with uh, a Q grade,
Mm,
I'm a Dan grade. My responsibility as a Dan grade is to move in a way that teaches the Q grade how to do the technique.
mm,
If I be resistant, I gain nothing, right? I just make myself frustrated and tired and like, so, that's why you always, as Dan grade, when I was a Q grade, I always run to the Dan grades, right? Because I wanted to train with them because they knew how to move so that I could understand the technique. So
mm,
in Aikido, what we do as when you're UK is you allow your Nage, you give them the movement to allow them to understand the technique rather than resisting them. And because when you resist, you make yourself vulnerable, right? So if someone's trying to put a lock on me and I resist, they'll just break my elbow, right? They can't. Well, they wouldn't in the martial arts, but they could, right? Because
mm.
something that's hard is easy to break. When you're
Yeah.
hard, you're easy to break, right? When you're soft and malleable, you're much harder to break. So we
Hmm.
do this trick in Aikido called unbendable arm. Have you ever heard of it?
I think I vaguely have, but please
Yeah.
tell our community.
So it's called unbendable arm, and it looks like a trick, but it's not really. It's just physics. So you hold your arm out, and you make a fist, right? And you hold it really, really hard, and then someone tries to bend it. Now, when you've got a fist, right, what that does is it contracts your muscles in your arm, and so of course it's really easy to bend. Someone who's stronger than you can bend it. And then the next time you extend your arm and you like make it long and extend. And really, we talk about, the sensei will talk about extend your ki and your energy and your mind, right? But really, it's physics because when you extend your arm, it becomes soft. And so
Mm,
when you have that extension, it's harder for someone to bend your arm because you're making this, it's not hard, it's an extension and it's soft. So in Aikido, we talk a lot about extension of energy and making that extension go further out, like fly fishing. Like when you throw the fly out. So it's that big extension. And I remember one of my senseis from Japan one day, he was doing a lecture, and sometimes they go all like esoteric. And he said, if you want to protect your car or your possessions, when you park your car, you draw a big circle of ki around your car, and you extend ki around your car to make it safe. But make sure you lock it. Right? So it's not magic, right? It's like, it's physics and it's all those sorts of things. But yeah, but it's fun to practice with that intent. And we don't need, like, we're not in a war situation, although that's debatable right now with the state of the world. This is not life and death all the time, and some things have to be fun, and you have to be able to explore that. And so your partner in Aikido gives you the opportunity to explore that without being resistant. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's anything that can leads people to have a belief in what they're about to do is super valuable, whether that's like bringing in concepts of ki or chi, it depends what martial art you're doing, or hara in other Japanese arts, or whether it is having a clear container around here's what can happen to you and here's what the instructor is not going to find acceptable from your training partner. um Here's how we're going to negotiate consent, build our way into that, like all these things that we do to make it more possible, I think, for people to practice. Not that I don't believe in magic, because actually I do, but that's a whole aside. When I'm thinking about martial art, I'm usually thinking practically. And that's why I think, like, I love having these conversations, being able to draw out, like, from a real ideas world and bringing it down to, and then what do you do differently in your class that you would not do otherwise? So I guess thinking about that, I do want to think about bringing feminism into martial arts, because I think that also feels very far away and hard to grasp at. So, what are some of the ways you think tangibly, practically, we can bring feminism into martial arts spaces?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, we both know martial arts are very patriarchal structures,
Mhm.
right? And because there's a sensei and there's dans and there's like there's etiquette and all this sort of stuff, and it's really hard to fight against that. So as a woman in martial, my sensei is actually a woman,
Mhm.
but as a woman in martial arts, there's been situations where you know, like a bloke will test you, right? And especially someone who is like a lower grade. They're like, how did you get your black belt? Blah blah blah. So I'm going to really see whether you can do something. And so it's really hard. But I guess it's about bringing that sense of equality back into the dojo, right? And not think, and I know that there are rules for a reason, right? There are rules why we bow to each other. There are rules, because it's a safety issue. There are all those sorts of rules. But sometimes, it's about lessening those rules, because those rules are patriarchal, right? Um, there are times when, like if I'm teaching a class, I'll allow questions, right? Because questions are important, right? That's how we learn. There are some instructors in martial arts that when sensei teaches, you just listen. You don't question, you don't ask questions, right? And that's about how do we challenge those structures, because questions are important.
Mm.
And yeah, so and the more women that practice, the better it can be. It's something simple like having proper change rooms for women, right? I mean, I've been to classes and like to seminars, and I've been around for a long time, so I don't have issues. But if I'm a young woman, I'm not going to get changed in the middle of the hall where all the other blokes are changing, right? So, even having change rooms for women, having women only classes, I think, are a good way also, because it's a safe environment. where women can, practice themselves. Having more women to practice with, right, is also good. So there's in our dojo, there's a really good proportion of men and women, and I
Mm.
feel like that changes the culture of the dojo. But yeah, it's really patriarchal, and I sometimes wonder why I do a martial arts. It is so structured, and like I'll do that. I call my teacher sensei. I'll you walk in, you bow, you do all those rituals, and then I'm like, what am I doing, right? Why do I do this? Because it's so against what I believe in. But I make a choice at the time. But I must say, one of my senseis, um, he's from um, he's from Queensland. He always shakes his head at me because like I'm really rebellious. Like he'll say something and I'll question it all the time. He just goes, "Oh, right?" He just shakes his head and he's like, "Oh," you know. But he allows me to do that,
Yeah.
right? And that's a good thing too, right? So he
Mm.
realizes that that's okay. So it does take us. It takes a dismantling of those structures and rules that recreate power imbalances, right? And it's tricky, right? Because like in society, we need rules and we need some people who have power, but the power shouldn't all be held in one structure, which is patriarchal. And yeah, and yeah, it's hard, but you know, the dojo is a microcosm of society sometimes.
Yes.
Right? You get there and you just go, oh my God, this is so male dominated, right? Even from even the gi that you have to wear, right? In Aikido, we wear hakama. It's not made for women. It looks so unattractive, right? Because it doesn't allow for your hips, but that's what we've got, and that's what we wear. So I don't know. I want someone to make a hakama for females. Um, that would be good. But yeah, it is tricky. But I think the more women that run dojos and operate them without those power structures to some extent, the better it is. But those power structures do exist, and they often what you'll see is that women in martial arts dojos do all the admin stuff, and then the sensei does all the all the if it's a male sensei does all the teaching and philosophy, and the women like support him in inverted commas, So,
Mm.
we need to see more women stepping up to become teachers, I think.
100%. I wanted to ask you actually how you do respond when you get a man try to challenge you, because let me tell you how I respond to this, and I
Okay.
know it's good, but I I think I embody so strongly. Like there is research about um, all gender martial arts being a sort of a stage in which, like a stage upon which there are these different the
Mm,
the
mm,
idea that martial arts have this capacity in order to help men, women, people of all genders experience gender in a different way, because women can quote unquote beat men, or women can have more technique or be a higher rank or anything like this.
mm,
And so I tend to take it as if I'm defending all of womankind when this
mhm,
type of challenge happens to me. And I will tend to meet that force with more force and take the risk that I will possibly win. And I've been training long enough now that most untrained men, I that is a pretty good gamble on my behalf, but it certainly risks my body. And
mm,
is maybe not the best for my personal safety.
mm.
How do you approach challenges from lower ranked men?
Yeah. And it's not always lower ranks. It's
Mm.
sometimes higher ranks as well who use their power. But it, I'm going to say it depends, right? So yes, I've been training longer. Like you, I've been training long enough now that I give the don't. Can I say the F word? But anyway,
Yes, you
don't.
can. It's
Uh,
totally fine.
I give the don't fuck with me vibe, right?
Yeah.
And most people won't, right? However, and they won't physically, right? So most of it is verbal, like, oh yeah, so but what if this happens, and what if you this happened to you and you did this and blah blah blah, right? And I just go, I just stick my fingers in your eyes and gouge your eyes out, mate. Like, and they're just like, oh, that's not Aikido, and I'm like, yeah, well, neither is like, doing what you said you're going to do, right? So sometimes it's verbal.
Mm.
I've had situations where and in Aikido, it's a little bit easier because it doesn't actually impact on your body. Because, like I said, when someone's coming at you full force and wants to prove something, all you got to do is deflect, right? So I've
Mm.
had situations where and as you know, as a higher grade, you have to make quick decisions in that moment, right? Because there's no choreographed technique when you get to a higher grade, right? You got to go, okay, what's happening here, and I got to make a decision. So I can tell because what you do in Aikido is you actually sort of draw the attack, right? So I can tell when someone's really gonna really come at me hard with all their force, and I just like deflect it. So I will just if they're coming at me really hard with a showman strike, which is a head strike. I let them and I just move out the way, and all of a sudden they're on the floor, right? And they're like, "Oh, what did you do?" I'm like, "Man, I didn't touch you." Right? Got out the way. Um, and I'll tell you another story. I have lots of stories. So I was with my partner one day,
Mm.
my ex-partner, and he was also an Aikido practitioner. And we were in Gertrude Street in Melbourne, right? It's a busy street, it's got restaurants. And there's this guy on the road and he's drunk. And there's a car in front of us and we're behind this car. And in the car in front of us there's four old people, right? Elderly people. And the guy's on the bottom of the car going, I want to die, right? Anyway, and so these people didn't know what to do. People were ringing police, whatever. And so my partner gets out and he's like, oh, I've got to get this dickhead off the road. I'm like, okay. And he gets out and he goes, hey, dickhead, get off the road, right? And so all of a sudden, this guy's attention is drawn to my partner. And of course, the four people speed away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes, I'm going to, so my partner's like, get off the road, you're being a dickhead, you heard it, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, I'm going to kill you. So he lunged at my partner, right? My partner just moved away and he just fell on the concrete and fell on his forearms and scraped his forearms, right? So he gets up and he goes, look what you did to me. And my partner said, I didn't do anything, mate. I just moved out the way, right? So the
Mm.
police came, right? And the police came and like the police go, so we got these calls that you like did all this fancy move, did some fancy move, and you like attacked him or something. And my partner goes, mate, I didn't do anything. I just got out the way, right? And so the guy's going, he did some fancy magic move on me, and anyway, and the police just said, all right, just go home because he was drunk, and they just put the guy in the paddy wagon, and we went home. But really, people think you just do this fancy thing, but all he did was just move away, and the guy just fell, right? Because he was attacking, right?
Mm.
And so it's the same thing. If someone really wants to come at you really, really hard, then you just diffuse it by letting them fall on their own sword in a way, right? You move out, you move. Um, so yeah, there's different ways that you can deal with it, but and yeah, verbal is the most common. Physically, yeah, I just move out. But there have been times where I have slammed someone on the floor because they just kept persisting, right? And so
Mm.
I've actually gone, okay, this is enough now. Like, and then and probably they won't do it again, will they? Once you do it once, they won't try again. Um, but most of those people get weeded out, as you probably know, from the dojo because they don't fit in to the culture. And so
Mm.
all of a sudden they just go, oh, nah, it's not the right place. And they'll go do some other martial art that's not Aikido.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now come to jujitsu to train with me, probably. No, just kidding. Although, I mean, part of it is I'm very aware my own ego is not, you know, absent in a lot of my decision making. Certainly, I don't respond too kindly when men think that I'm going to be like a rest or a rest round. That really tickles me in a way that makes me want to respond by attacking, not by moving out of the way. And it's something
Mm.
to work on for sure. So it's not
Yeah,
in terms of self-preservation.
yeah, yeah. Maybe. Yeah, I mean, now is another option. You can think about. I don't know how it'd work in jiu-jitsu because, like, yeah, it's a different art, right? So I
Mm.
don't know, but you could just like tap out or something. I don't know. Like, I don't know how you do it, but
You can do that sometimes, and sometimes I will do that when I feel like someone is really, really, really strongly resisting. Is I'll just go floppy because all of a sudden their resistance makes no sense, and it
exactly.
just kind of can shake them out of that mode of being like, oh, right, um, what what's happening now? All of a sudden now it's very much shines a light on how much resistance you're putting in when it's not being met with more resistance.
Exactly. That's perfect. Yeah, go floppy. Yeah, that's like, and that's exactly right. It's same as in Aikido. You just move out the way or go floppy or don't resist. So yeah, but yeah, I don't know. You get that in life all the time, don't you? Like, you're in a meeting and some guy comes up with some brilliant idea that you just said 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, really? That was a great idea. And I just said it 5 minutes ago. But anyway, whatever.
But anyway, nevertheless, we persist. Final question for you, Asunta, is why do you think it is that people have such a strong response to martial arts? So one of the things that we talk about a lot on this show is people will say things like, Aikido saved my life, or
Mm,
doesn't matter. Kickboxing saved my life. It doesn't matter the martial art.
mm,
It's often a similar sentiment, and it doesn't need
mm.
to literally mean saved my life.
Yeah.
That's not always what people mean. But what are some of the reasons that you think people have this strong response in the martial arts community?
Well, for me, I don't know if other people, but for me, martial arts is a community that of people that I just, you know, like hanging out with, right? And so that sense of community is a lifesaver. I mean, we're so isolated in this world and detached from things, through phones and social media and all those sorts of things, that getting together a group of people, and like, I've known people for 30 years that I only see twice a year at a martial arts camp, right? And they're my best friends, right? And I know that if she is a fan, I could call them, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a sense of community.
Mhm.
It's also the physicality. So in Aikido, like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, you're close to somebody, you're touching their body. You're like on top of each other. And in any other context, that'd be gross because, as probably most guys are sweaty and yucky, right? Right. In any other context, that'd be gross. But in a martial arts context, it's actually like, I don't know, that's what you do.
Yeah.
And it's like you feel, this physicality. And, as you probably know, when you do a martial arts seminar and you do 5 hours of training and you get off that mat and you're so exhausted, but you feel so energized.
Yes.
So that's another feeling, like that feeling of power because you made it. It was like, I don't know, somehow you just survived this 5 hour grueling training. Um, and it makes you feel so empowered. Most of the time, right? Not for everybody, but most of the time. So yeah, I guess that's why, because you feel alive, right? And it probably, it doesn't have to be martial arts. It can be all sorts of different sports, right? When you hit that threshold. Um, but I think, yeah, it's not a for me. Aikido is not an art. Like, I do yoga, and that's very much a solitary practice.
Hmm.
But for me, Aikido is a community practice, right? And you're practicing with different people, and so that's the difference for me with martial arts. It is a community, and like, you sort of just, and like, even when I met you, like, you don't do Aikido, but I knew you did a martial arts. I'm like, oh, you're one of my people, right?
Yeah.
You have people, so yeah, and people are important.
People are so important. And community is the most common response that I get. I think I've surveyed a few hundred people about this question, and community is the overwhelming response to that. And so, it's interesting. I think we know it's so important. Um, I do wonder a lot, if people are getting enough community. I guess there's probably some research showing that is declining in the social media, internet, disconnected, polarized age. And martial arts are one of those few spaces really where you can meet people from all walks of life who have very differing life views to
Yeah.
us. We have a commonality, and I think there's just something so beautiful in that.
Yeah, it's interesting because there are people that are in my martial arts circle that had they not been Aikido people, I probably wouldn't have been friends with them.
Mm.
And I don't know about jiu-jitsu, but we have this saying that Aikido attracts really weird people. And some of them are weird, right? Like you just go, oh, you're a weirdo, but it just works, right? And yeah, you probably would be friends with them outside of that, but there's this sense of camaraderie as well. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think similar across most martial arts, although they just have their own specific flavor of weird, I think,
Yeah.
is probably the difference. Assunta, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything that you would like to share with our community before we sign off?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so. Yeah, I just think that, for women and particularly, in terms of women protecting themselves and looking after yourself, the most important thing is just believe in yourself, set some boundaries, and get support from other women. I think now more than ever, the way the world is going in this era of Trump, and I don't want to get into politics, but the personal is political. That we as women need to really get off the keyboards and get in rooms
Mm,
and start talking to each other and start building each other up. And because that's what patriarchy wants to do. It wants to separate us. And I think we need to come together as a community and start talking again about these issues because our rights can be taken away really quickly.
absolutely. And that is a really important note to leave it on. And that's our homework to you, is to get into a physical space with at least one other person this week, which may sound like an obvious thing, like obviously I'm going to do that. But if you work from home, it's pretty easy for that not to be the case, and maybe even rarer for it to be a group of people of three or more. So, that's the challenge to you. If you do a martial art, you're already doing it, but maybe having being in conversation before.
Yeah, really a really good way. And have wine with it.
And have wine with it. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all of this wisdom with our community, Assunta. I hope we do this again sometime. I feel like this might be a follow on in another year, perhaps.
Sure, no problem. I'd be happy to. Thanks. It was nice talking to you.
Thank you for being part of the club. We'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to get in touch, please refer to the information in the show notes. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider leaving us a review or subscribing on whichever platforms you use to listen or watch the podcast. The Conscious Combat Club acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands in which we work, live, and play. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. We'd like to say thank you to Nari for the beautiful song Shape Me, heard at the beginning and end of every episode. If you'd like to connect with Nari, you can find her on Instagram at Nari the Saga.
Don't gotta tell you what my name is, I don't gotta explain it. Walk in the room, hear a boom erupting like I'm famous. I'm here shedding shells, I'm shameless. I fear nothing, no complacence. Walk too many tight ropes with no hope, so I became this poster they hold over all the heads of trauma holders. You don't need to know my history, I move boulders. Atlas shrug, cause I lifted the weight above his shoulders. No pretense of defense, move first like chess soldiers. This goes deeper than empowerment, cause I'm the one that power it. Physical meets mental, challenge me to keep devouring. If I can't change the scenery, at least I change perspectives. No longer isolated, but elevated and selective. Darkest places become beautiful spaces. This is where rage meets patience, meets power meets gracious. Meets, we're so glad you came and the feeling is contagious. When you the walking impact of intended bad intentions. When you the manifesting of collecting all they tensions. You the soul and body hold it all and still remember. But I'm a work in progress, testament to all contenders. Forgot what it was like to have control over self. Forgot what it was like to be the one in charge. Forgot in my reflection I could see all my wealth. Forgot that with my bare hands I break all these bars, barriers and obstacles. They can't cage me, they can't chronicle all my experiences and reduce them to appearances. When I was truly beaten, gave myself clearances to fall down, mess up, and get myself back up. I'm not looking for clovers cause I don't believe in luck. Damn, you were badass, I heard them say it clearly. Why thank you very much, I know now I'm not weary of what's next for me. Cause I expect to see growth like I was planted, watered, fed, and bloomed to be. The positivity and accountability, knowing they won't step if I'm the agent of my agency. I think I found my voice again, huh? I think I found my voice again, huh? I'm not sorry, you're the end where I begin. Boundaries, I know them well. Take a breath and meditate. Who is she? I know her well. Now I get to open gates. 1, 2, 1, 2. I don't need your permission. And if you get uncomfortable, then use your intuition to know that I won't stay where respect is ever missing. And everything I do, that's me making decisions. It's truly underrated, the value of self-worth. Forgot that I was rich from the moment of my birth. A penny from my thoughts, no really, you can't afford it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it, huh?